morning. I'm Karen Gender, and I'm one of the liturgists for Eliot Chapel, and I'm joined this morning by our minister, Reverend Krista ktaves, who will present today's message. I am so pleased to welcome all of you to our worship this morning. Whether you are here on site or watching from home, we are united as one community. This is a liberal religious community of spiritual seekers. We welcome you all in the fullness of your age, race, ethnicity, your ways of being in body and mind, your gender expression, and sexual orientation. Our core values are freedom, reason, respect, and love. If you are visiting today for the first time, a special welcome to you. I hope you feel warmly welcomed and that today's message speaks to you. If you are here in person, please fill out the guest form that you probably received on your way in, and both sides if you have children with you, so we can stay in touch. If you are visiting online, let us know you're here by emailing welcome@eliotchapel.org so we can personally welcome you into this beloved community. We also invite everyone to coffee hour after the service, which is through these doors and to your left. If you are new or newish, please take a blue cup and we will be sure to greet you. Today is a unique service focused on questions. Reverend ktaves will entertain your questions about UU faith and theology, our congregational life, and current issues. Each of you will have received an index card as you walked in. If you haven't, you can just raise your hand and someone will get you one. If you have a question, please write it down, and we will collect the questions during the time for all ages when the ushers will come around with the baskets. Reverend Krista also welcomes questions from children and will answer those during the time for all ages. If you're a child, or if you can help a child with a question, please put a little star in the corner of your card and raise your hand when we start the time for all ages. And finally, many of our members and friends will have received a letter from the Board of Trustees on Friday about the staffing changes that will take place in early August. The board is hosting a conversation after today's service at 11:30 in room 1, which is in the basement. You can use the elevator by the bathrooms to get there, and questions about staffing should be directed here. Welcome.
Good morning. Very nice to see you. The chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. The bowl represents the sacred interconnectedness of all life and this community, and the flame represents the spark of the divine that lives in each of us. For the gift of this day and for our community of spiritual nurture and compassion, we give thanks. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul. Our opening words are "Here we are so gathered" by Patricia Sheldon. Here is where we gather in the presence of the sacred. Here is where we gather to experience the holy. Here is where, together, we face the unanswerable questions and acknowledge that not knowing is as sublime as it is frustrating. Here is where we unite in the midst of life and all the glories and suffering it can hold, knowing that both are ever present. Here is where we ask, think, risk, discuss, ponder, and offer what might not be welcomed or even acceptable somewhere else. Here is where, if we allow it, we are deeply moved. Here is where we encounter each other in deep and powerful ways that surprise us, yet without which we would not survive. Here we gather to worship, to experience something happen, perhaps something different for each of us according to our beliefs, something unnamed, uncategorized, and unusual, yet absolutely necessary. Here we are so gathered, our minds, our hearts, and our souls. And so our worship begins. I invite you to rise as you do for our opening hymn, number 354. We will sing verses 1 and 4, because this is a very long hymn.
I'd like to invite you to join me in reading the Congregational Covenant that is printed in your order of service. As a free congregation, we promise to one another our mutual support. To create beloved community, we promise to be kinder to each other than we have to be, to listen fully to each other with an open mind and heart, to speak responsibly and respectfully, to find ways to improve our church for all members and friends.
So this is the time, if you have your index card, to write your question. Please put your name on the question. And I already have 3 questions from children that were submitted early. Thank you. And if there are any other children here and you want to send me a question, write your question down or have an adult write the question for you if you don't write yet. And we will make sure those questions get to me like right away, because I'm going to answer them in this section. And then the ushers are going to come around with the baskets. So if you have a question to submit, just put it in the basket. And then Karen is going to be so kind as to organize the questions, because there's always going to be more than can be answered. There always are. Some of them are going to be connected. They're going to be similar questions, so we'll group them together. She'll group them and choose one. And then also, if any of the questions are related to the staffing changes that are happening, she will keep those and give those to the Board of Trustees. But mostly, please hold on to those questions until we meet after the service. All right? So, I got 3 questions which were amazing questions. And I got to think about them all week. So, here's the first question. How is our church made? How many of you could answer that question? How is our church made? Well, there's lots of ways to answer this. I'm going to start the first one with a little game that I learned when I was a kid in religious education, and maybe you know this. Okay, do you know this one? Here's the church. Here's the steeple, which we have one, so that's good. Open the door, and there's the people. Isn't that cute? All right. So yeah, the people are our congregation, but there's more than that. You know, we have a mission, which is to love courageously. So that's like to take a chance and risks with the way we love, right? To inspire each other to spiritual growth. Right? That's one of the parts of our mission. So we have a calling not only to grow ourselves, to support those around us, and also to be a beacon of light and love to our community. So the mission is also our church. And then there are the values. People always ask, like, what do Unitarian Universalists believe? Well, the answer isn't that we believe in anything you want, because that's just too easy, because our answer is we are also accountable for what we believe. But really what centers us are our values. And those are values like generosity. So we give freely. Love is at the center of everything we do. Equity, which is that we care about the ways that in this world not everybody is equal, and we want to do our part to change that. We're a generous people. I already said that, didn't I? Generosity. Maybe that's because it's really super important. Transformation, that we can affirm that we are always being transformed. And sometimes that transformation is something we try to do, which is one of the reasons we come here. And sometimes it just happens, and it is a blessing. So those are some of the values that also make up our congregation. And that was Alba's question. Thank you, Alba, for a very, very good question. Now here's a really cool one. I've been thinking about this one all week really deeply. It's by Clark. Am I part of a simulation? Can I only see the perspective of myself? Clark, are you going to go into philosophy when you go to college? Wouldn't surprise me at all. I really like your question, and they're kind of 2 different questions, right? So one is, am I part of a simulation? Because if we're part of a simulation, that means that we're inside somebody else's imagination, right? And that imagination maybe created a video game, right? And someone is playing the video game. So we really aren't in charge at all. That would be part if we were part of a simulation. That means if someone stopped thinking about us, poof, we would be gone. So I'm not sure that we're part of a simulation, because then we'd have no free choice. Although maybe in the game we would think we had free choice, right? And whoever had our lives as a video game, I mean, couldn't that be so boring? Like the big choice, oh, am I going to have oatmeal or cereal for breakfast? Bing, you get 3 points, right? So how would that work? But I'm thinking about the idea as well, though. Your question, think about that. Maybe we live in a whole world that is created by something way bigger than ourselves. And for us, that bigger thing is love. And whether you are a theist and believe that that love is embodied in a God, or whether you are a humanist and you understand that love embodied in the human spirit, love is always the center for us. But there is something to think about are we totally in charge of our lives? Because we also understand that there are systems, like economic systems, there's ways that we make money, educational systems, the judicial system, the penal system. There's all kinds of systems, sexism, racism, homophobia, all those things that really hurt us. And those are things that are out of our control. So that's a difficult question for us. As Unitarian Universalists, we like to think that we're totally free and that we always make up our own minds just with what's inside us, but it's not true. We make decisions based on how we were raised, the class we were grown up in, so we think that there's certain things we think are true because of the class we grew up in, or the gender that we're in, or the sexual orientation that we have. So there's different ways that sometimes some choices are made for us. And we need to find ways to be aware of that, to be aware of how we're making our choices. And I think that's a big part of what your religious education is about. It's about helping you to understand our values, helping you to understand yourself, and then helping you to make wise, brave choices. So Clark, thank you for your awesome, awesome question. And the final question from George. Why do we go to church? Do you come to church because your parents make you? Good. So I decided to list a whole bunch of reasons that people come to service. And if that reason applies to you, raise your hand. You come here because you want to be part of a community. Yep. You come here because you have friends here. You come here because you are looking for people who share your values and ideas. Aha. You come here because it's fun. All right. You come here because sometimes you get a peaceful feeling inside. You come here because you like to grow and learn new things. You come here because you want to be a better person. You come because you care about the world and want to do your part to make it better. You come here because we have an amazing pianist and music director. Thank you. And you come here because you believe in love. So, those are all kinds of reasons people come. Is there anything I missed? All right. Coffee! You come for the coffee. Indeed. So that is the end of the children's story. But I know you have to sit in the service the whole time because we don't have nursery care in July. So I have a little game for you to play for the rest of the service. Okay, every part of the service, and your mom and dad can help you see what part we're in, I want you to rank how boring it is for you. Okay? So 0 is like you're totally bored, And 5 is like, you're not bored at all, and you're really having a good time, right? And then kind of think when the service is over what the average is, like how boring was it, and how not boring was it? And then I want to hear that from you. Okay, so that's your assignment for the rest of this service. It's the how boring is this game? And that's the end of our time for all ages. So I invite you in the spirit of questioning and curiosity to join me in prayer and meditation as you are willing and able. This prayer is called Many Paths by Martha Kirby Capo. As we enter this silent and sacred space, let us renew both our commitment and our covenant. There are those among us who have endured a loss in the past week. May their hope be uplifted again in this community of faith. There are those among us who have struggled with hardship in the past week. May they find renewed strength in this community of faith. There are those among us who have wrestled with questions that seem to have no answer in the past week. May they find sanctuary during their search in this community of faith. There are those among us who have cherished an unexpected joy in the past week. May their rejoicing be celebrated in this community of faith. Let us enter into a time of silence for the prayers and meditations in our hearts. Let us speak the names of those we would hold in prayer. As we commit to continue our free and responsible search for truth, may we covenant to honor the many paths that have led us to this community of faith. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to remain seated for hymn number 403. We will sing it through 3 times, because it's a very short hymn, and it only has 1 verse. 403. Indeed, we give of ourselves to thee. As Unitarian Universalists, one of the values we center is generosity. This value cultivates us and guides us in a spirit of gratitude and hope. As generous people, we covenant to share our faith, our presence, and our resources. And that is why we give away half of our offering every Sunday. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. And this month, our shared partner is the St. Louis area diaper bank. Did you know that food stamps cannot be used for diapers or feminine products? And many mothers will forego their own needs to diaper their children or to put food on the table. And the diaper bank seeks to provide these essential items to families in our community who are struggling. So let us be a generous people. Will the ushers please come forward? And could the questions please be given to Karen, please, so she can have a look at them. Will the ushers please come forward? Please join me in blessing this offering with the words printed in your order of service. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. All right, I have an opening reading to start off our questions. It's written, a very short reading by Kevin Nye, who calls himself an unfundamentalist. In the Gospels, Jesus is asked 187 questions. He answers maybe 8 of them. He himself asks 307. Maybe faith isn't about certainty, but learning to ask and sit in the complexity of good questions. And with that, we will start, and I will ask Karen to keep track of time, and we will stop at 5 to the hour. And I'm going to step away from this pulpit. Yes, yes.
We're going to stopping?
5 to.
5 to.
That gives us time for all the other very important things.
Okay, well, the first one is just a shout out to Bob Becker and Jim Lyon. And if everybody would turn around, you will see that there is a new balcony up there, railing. So it is safe for all. And as a person who did kind of hyperventilate when I saw some children sitting right on that first in prior time. So just a thank you to our kids. And Jim Gender, who also helped install it. Okay. All right. Reverend Ktaves. Others may know, but I am confused about the timeline and process for calling, hopefully you, to be our full-time minister.
Oh, that didn't take long. First question. So the timeline is, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the process too. Because of the changes that happened in our congregation so quickly, Reverend Doug offered to the board that he would complete only the first year of his interim. And so we really are still in a second year of interim that will not be led by me, because I am what is called an inside candidate, which means that you already have in your mind someone you might want to be your next lead minister. And so I've been hired on a contract by the board for 1 year. And during that year, we will both be evaluating each other and talking with each other and deciding if we want to make this relationship permanent. We'll be getting a lot of support from the UUA. Reverend David Pyle is our consultant for that. And there are others who will be providing a lot of support to the search team. If the search team is here, would you please rise so we can see who among the search team is here?
Yay!
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So these folks are going to be asking a lot of you in the fall. They have there'll be events planned, and they'll be doing a lot of discernment. And then we will have a conversation, myself and the search team, sometime between now and the end of January. And at the end of January, we will both decide if we wish to pursue a call. So at the end of January, we will know that. And then I guess I'm going to be interviewed for this is the longest interview in the world. Right? So it's already been a year, and it's going to be another, I don't know how many months. And then we will have several months of deeper conversations with each other. And by the end of March, there will be a congregational meeting where you get to vote on whether you want to call me as your settled minister. And that's the process, that's the timing. And hopefully it's a celebration, and we're going to have a party, a really big party. And you remember my favorite dessert? Does everybody remember my favorite dessert? Gluten-free angel food cake with fresh strawberries and whipped cream. Okay? Real whipped cream.
You heard it here.
Rebecca Shooter's already made me one. Bless your heart, Rebecca. So that's the process. And I'm answering this question here because I'm up front, but the best people to continue to ask your questions to is the search team. So those are your go-to people for the rest of the process.
So for this year, these are two questions that are related to this year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the major focus, of course, of this year? Of course, we are in search, but is there anything else you would add for this year? And do you believe that we will be able to rebuild our congregation and financial strength, and how can we help?
All right. Can you go through those questions one at a time?
Sure. What do you see as the major focus for our congregation during the next year?
The board is beginning a strategic planning process, I believe, this year. So there'll be that happening. There is also continued work going to be done, I believe, at the board level on revising our policy governance to form more of a collaborative governance, and I think some of that work is happening. It will still be, honestly, policy governance. There's different kinds of policy governance. We had one kind called the Carver model, which is a very, very strict model. But the board has been studying, Hotchkiss is another person who has a different model of policy governance. They've been studying that all last year. I as well studied that book through the year, so I understood what they were doing. This was all led by Reverend Doug, bless his heart. We will miss him so much. So that's some of the work. The nuts and bolts work will be to really build a structure for this congregation, a governance and operational structure that matches our new size. And in terms of rebuilding our strength, remember, rebuilding strength does not mean numbers. It means rebuilding everything else we do to be stronger. And when you focus on being a community where spiritual growth is very important, where we learn, where we care for each other, where we give of our time, and where we serve the world around us, that is what growth looks like. And if we do those things well, then numerical growth is a side effect of doing that all well.
And how can we help?
Volunteer. It's very, very simple. As we adjust to a different size church, a lot of things that were done by staff won't be done by staff anymore. And either we have volunteers who pick up some of that, or those things aren't going to happen anymore. And there'll be more information about that at the meeting after the service.
How is Eliot reaching out to be more diverse in terms of age, race, and socioeconomic?
Honestly, we're not doing enough. That's the honest truth. We're not doing enough. One of the things that I would like to do this year is to start a worship team, and we will be studying what it looks like to create a worship service that responds to different age groups, what that means for the way we do worship. And so that's going to be exciting, and we're going to be practicing and trying out some things. So be prepared to have some experimentation in this worship service, and then we will be happy to receive your feedback on how we create a worship service that is more, that more responds to people who maybe don't have PhDs, who have a range of economic circumstances, also aren't grounded solely in white middle class values. Things like that. That's one thing. I got to give a shout out to Scott Stewart, our DRE. He does a fantastic job of doing this with the children. A very good job. And we do have a justice team that is very hard at work. I mean, one of our priorities is voting rights. We know what's happening in our state, that voting rights have been, become harder and harder to vote. And who it's harder to vote has been done very strategically. So we are doing work within the community around voter registration and voter engagement. We have a great team that is doing that kind of work. We have an immigration justice team that is working to support a more humane, just, equitable immigration system, because we know our immigration system is steeped in systemic racism, and it does a lot of harm. That's just a few things. We could go on a long time.
Another about our specific church. Can you discuss the lot next door, and is there a plan for its use? If yes, please share it. And is it realistic that we would continue to fund, or would we be able to fund and implement it? And if not, why do we hang on to it for a mortgage payment every year?
I become the lead minister on August 1st. I honestly don't have a lot of answers to those questions because I'm not in that seat yet, and I haven't spent a lot of time studying it. I know that there is no grand plan. It certainly is a topic of conversation for the board, I think we have some really important things this year to do that might put that on a back burner. I don't know, but that's really a conversation that we will have once I'm actually in that position.
Can you talk about the status of your lawsuit against?
Sure, yes, I can talk. So for some background information, I am one of the clergy in a 14 clergy plaintiff team. We've launched a lawsuit against the state of Missouri saying that the abortion ban in Missouri is unconstitutional because it violates the separation of church and state. That those who put this law, thank you. That those who put this law into place grounded their decisions in their conservative Christian faith around the belief that life begins at conception. And so many of us are saying that this is a violation of our freedom. And it's not just a violation of religious people's freedom, it's a violation of the entire state, because every resident of Missouri is being forced to live under a conservative Christian law. Now, given that, our faith leaves it up to your personal conscience. So you can believe that life begins at conception if you are a Unitarian Universalist. You just can't force that on anybody else. So for us, being forced to follow a law is a violation of our faith. So that's the case. Where we're at. The government, not surprisingly, filed a motion for dismissal, saying that we did not have standing because someone like me can't get pregnant because I'm like 53, but that's not the standing we have. Our standing is based on being taxpayers, and that our tax money is going to enforce a law that is unconstitutional. So whether we can have children or not is really beside the point. But that's what one of their arguments was. And they also argued that by removing our case would force our religious beliefs on the rest of the state, which is not the case. We're just giving room for each person to make their own determination. The judge heard the case in July. Both parties made their cases. It was long. It was an hour-and-a-half trial downtown St. Louis, and the judge said that we have standing and that our case can move forward. So now we are moving into the discovery phase, and after that, I believe that we will ask the judge who will be assigned to this case for a summary judgment. And if that happens, then likely the state will appeal, and it will go to the Supreme Court.
How did you find your way to Unitarian Universalism?
Oh, I love this question. I love the story. So my mom, it's my mom, actually. So my mom, we grew up progressive Mennonite, so we didn't look like different from anybody else. The basis of Mennonite faith, which is Christian, is that you're baptized as an adult and that you are a pacifist. But my mom was feeling a little bit hemmed in by the Mennonite faith, and so she decided to explore paganism. So my mom was a pagan Mennonite. And there were other kind of disaffected Mennonite women that formed like this secret group, and they would meet during the full moons on the back 40 of our farm and build a fire. My dad always built the fire and then skedaddled out of there so they could have their little celebration, and they would do the full moon. Well, then my mom learned, or the Unitarian Church of Olinda, which is like half an hour from where I grew up, had a women's group that also did the same things. So my mom went to the Unitarian women's pagan group and did the full moon cycles in the basement of the Olinda Church. They learned she's a storyteller. They said, "You want to preach? You want to do a story?" She said, "Sure." And I was coming home that weekend to visit. I was in Toronto in graduate school at the time. And my mom told me she was going to preach in the Olinda Church. I said, "What the hell kind of church would invite you to come tell stories?" She said, "Well, you're going to have to see." "I don't know. Let's go find out." So I went to the Olinda Church, and I grabbed every single brochure that I could. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this really exists?" And when I went back to Toronto, I started attending the first Unitarian congregation of Toronto, where I became a Unitarian in 1998. And that's how I got here.
Well, and are you a theist? And if so, what flavor?
I'm an agnostic. That's really what I am. And my form of agnosticism is that I really want there to be a God, and I want there to be an afterlife, but I have no way of proving it, so I leave it up to the universe. And I tend to feel I tend to feel a spirit when I am with people. It's not something that I feel so much by myself, like that kind of sense, like a holy presence. I feel it mostly like in the silence during the prayer. That's when I feel that presence, mostly. When I'm by myself, it's all about the natural world for me. I love getting my hands dirty. I have my dirt under my fingernails right now that I missed, because I always garden. But I am an agnostic, and I do feel, I find a lot of meaning in the liberal Christian faith, and often I will use scripture for my sermons because I love seeing what can happen with it. And I was lucky to go to a very liberal Christian seminary, and I did my clinical pastoral education during seminary in a Catholic hospital with a liberal, formerly Catholic priest who is gay, so he left the priesthood, and he studied liberation theology. So that was a big part of my formation.
And how do your Canadian roots affect your sermons and outlook on life?
Oh my gosh. Oh, Canada, eh? Oh, that's a good question. Actually, I do have an answer for that. Canada is more of a blend between Britain and the United States. So the value of the individual is moderated more. There's a deeper value of the collective, which is why we have things like universal health care and stronger social programs and even stronger environmental legislation, even though we remain one of the biggest polluters of the world because of our focus on natural resources. But I would say that collective, a different balance between the individual and the collective, whereas in the United States, we have individualism like off the charts, and we're, as Unitarian Universalists, really seeing the damage of this, so we're trying to create a different balance between the individual and the collective. Like, for instance, I've often thought that we really should, I know we're moving towards a new version of our principles and values, possibly in our denomination, but if we were still using the 7 principles, I would flip them, and I would put the interdependent web of existence on the top, and then every value is understood through that lens, rather than the way we have it now, which is the individual and every value is reflected through that lens. I would have switched those. That's all the questions? What time are we at? We have another, 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Does anybody have a question?
What question would you wish to ask?
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about it. I left my heart open. The question is, what question would I have asked if I had a choice? I think I might have said, why do I love Eliot so much? Well, I do. So as you know, I've been in St. Louis for a long time. I've been here since 2005. I came to serve Emerson Chapel out in Ellisville. So I was here when Daniel O'Connell was still your lead minister and Bonnie Vijard was your associate. And so I got to know this church through them, but also through a lot of social justice things. And especially when Ferguson happened, and I believe Reverend Barbara was in her 2nd year, which is really big because you usually figure with ministries that it's by year 5 that you really settle and have built up your trust with the congregation. And so she had to do this really radical ministry in year 2. So we were all rooting for her. And also because of you guys started a vigil, right? So we came to your vigil a few times. Emerson decided to support your vigil. And then we thought, well, we can do this. So we started a vigil out in Chesterfield, in the valley, Chesterfield Valley. And then a whole lot of your people came to support that vigil. So we were going to each other's vigils. And I got to know a whole lot of your social justice warriors. And that really was when I started to really feel a connection to this congregation. I think that's it. Thank you for your great questions. We had just enough. Thank you. There were no gotcha questions there. Thank you. So our closing hymn, please rise and body your spirit for number 126, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Our closing words are by Rainer Maria Rilke. Have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books written in a foreign language. Do not now look for answers. They cannot now be given to you because you could not live them. It is a question of experiencing everything. At present, you need to live the question. Perhaps you will gradually, without even noticing it, find yourself experiencing the answer some distant day. And so we extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please be seated for one final musical gift. Thank you, David. And thank you, Adam, for your beautiful music this morning. And thank you all for coming to this morning. It's been an honor spending this time with you. Remind you that we are having a conversation with the board at 11:30 in room 1. You just go out these doors and there's elevators between the 2 bathrooms. You go to the first floor and we're at the end of the hall. And I want to talk to the kids about how bored you were. So go in peace. Blessings on all of you.